open the door. I'll let you in. One thing's for sure, that I'm trusting. I won't speak more. That I'm not strong. One thing's for sure, that I'm not alone. Well, hello. It is Sarah Jane from Access Your True Nature, where I help animals and people return to trust and really empower you to know that you are your own best medicine. And even though we cannot change what has happened to us, we can certainly transform through it. And today I really want to speak to why trust is so vital. It is the cornerstone, the foundation for your well-being. And I've seen many posts across my Facebook feed this past week speaking to suicide and depression from many different perspectives after the world-renowned chef Anthony Bourdain and the famous bag designer Kate Spade took her own life. And I'll admit, depression is something that I know incredibly well. And I've had my PhD of that life experience of the highs and lows of living with being very sensitive, not only to my own thoughts and feelings and beliefs, but to what is collectively tapped into as part of oneness and consciousness at this time when so many people are waking up. And that it is time, it's overdue, in fact, that we start to speak to the many faces and facets of depression. And I'll admit, when I read about Kate Spade and Anthony Bourdain's deaths, I wasn't surprised. More so, again, I was reminded that money doesn't buy happiness. Achievement doesn't buy happiness. And we all struggle with our own inner demons. So while it is a great thing to be able to receive, to have the money and the resources to do our work better and more simply and reach more people so that we can stop the hurting of other people because we're hurting and stop hurting Mother Earth and all other life forces as well. It's an inside job and one that we all need support in because you quite frankly can't see it when you're in it. And why I believe trust is so vital in how we either show up and thrive regardless of what life throws at us or literally give up the ghost. And here's the thing, all humans have 3 innate desires. They're just built into us, that we are happy, that we have success, that we are safe, and that we can trust that we can build healthy relationships when we trust that we're enough. And because we are so diverse, everyone will define these sort of basic lower rungs of Maslow's theory, these things differently based on what I call the trust factor. And in a nutshell, it is really about your background, how you were brought up, how you've been grown up, your life experiences, your culture, your ancestry, that is deeply rooted often in familial or cultural trauma that hasn't been resolved. The second one is your personality. Who are you as a person? How do you show up? Who do you believe that you are? And how are you wired? How are you hardwired to make the most of this one precious life that you have? And the third is conditioning. And these are all the social mores and moralities, the values, the belief systems, the programming that has really created a sense of separation where as in the Matrix. We either choose to take the blue pill or the red pill. And the reason I believe that most people don't know why they feel what they're feeling and then try to suppress whatever that is because self-trust is a root problem. It's not a symptom. And people are often highly aware of their symptoms and speak to stress and health issues and fatigue and money troubles and struggles at work and relationship breakdown. And the list goes on and on. But most of the solutions for these symptoms do not call people's attention to self-trust, and therefore only act as a band-aid. They're temporary solutions. They're not cures. And, suicides back to back may be having some kind of effect on you or a trigger on you when it's in the media like this, where often we wake up thinking, oh my gosh, we have a medical problem or an imbalance in our body chemistry that's causing anxiety and depression, when in actual fact, what we have is a lifestyle problem and a problem that goes across all 5 layers of being human. And the commitments that I speak to in many of my classes and webinars and resources that you can find on my SoundCloud or YouTube account, addressing the many different shapes that depression and anxiety show up. Most people have no idea that distrust correlates directly with stress levels and health and performance issues. And here's the thing, and I say it all the time, it's that metaphor of you're the gun, but your environment is the trigger. And this is why we can cope and go through the sort of automatic, mechanistic idea of what being human in a westernized world looks like, and seemingly be okay. But eventually, as Gabor Mate, one of my great mentors, says, the body will make you stop. And this is where we have these chronic health issues or complete breakdowns of our life. And I know a lot about that 17 years ago, when my life as I knew it fell through the cracks, and literally every one of my resources, my physical attributes, my identity in an industry that I had grown and built my name in, it all disappeared overnight. And, this is where Viktor Frankl talks about this in Nazi concentration camps, where we can literally have our lives ripped away from us in a heartbeat. But the one thing as resilient human beings that can never be taken away from us, regardless of what our situation is the power of choice. And according to Paul Zak, who is the director of the Center for Neuroeconomic Studies and a professor of economic psychology and management at Claremont Graduate University, he says in the space of business that employees that are in a high trust organization are more productive. They have more energy at work, they collaborate better with their colleagues, and they stay with their employers longer than people working at low trust companies. They also suffer less chronic stress and are happier with their lives. They feel more fulfilled, which of course is always going to enable a stronger sense of true belonging, where we want to perform. And I see the same thing with animals, in our relationship with animals. And I think that the reason people have such low awareness about self-trust, how to be the authority of their own lives, is that we live in a culture that is highly oriented toward external authority, which rewards problem solving as something to be proud of, when we actually start to go on automatic of creating problems that don't even exist in order to get acknowledgement or validation. So I want you to just take a moment to think about this. When you were young, you were taught to play by the rules of certain external authority figures, such as parents or teachers or community leaders and churches and governments and institutions and law enforcement. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with external authority. I'm also not saying it's infallible. But I want you to understand that a natural imbalance occurs in our bodies, in our lives, because as children, you're taken out of choice. You stop listening to your body's natural impulses for fear of those primal fears of being abandoned or rejected, which out in, caveman land meant near death all the time. You can't survive without tribe. You can't survive with the eyes on you. And this is where, if you haven't taken the adverse childhood experience test and found out how high your ACE score is, I recommend that you do that now by going across to accessyourtruenature.com. I will post a link below this video. But just for now, I want you to just look at how imbalances occur when the adults in your life don't create safety or a sense of strong, healthy boundaries for you, because they haven't had them in their life. And so they can't teach us how to cultivate our own internal authority and self-trust. And maybe until this moment, you've never even known it's a very prevalent thing that is running your life. The distinguishing factor between whether the impact on your life as children, that we're being grown and where our nervous system is being wired, and at 18, the neural pathways that we're not using are pruned, which can have a dire effect if you have suffered from adverse childhood experiences. Your neural pruning is already happening before you reach the age of 18. So by the time you reach maturity, you're working on a very, very low bank of vital life force energy. And I think the distinguishing factor between whether the impact of all of that, of your story, of your family, of your way of being in the world, is always affected by your ability to trust yourself. It's important to really look at this and where it's impacting every area of your life. I always say how you do anything is how you do everything. And most of the time, this is a very unconscious pattern repeat of addiction, of self-abuse, of where we're constantly resisting life having our back, because we're not seeing the lies of our self-limitation and how they're harming us, and how we're labeling them as right or wrong or good or bad, and then placing that upon ourselves. And this is where animals and horses have saved my life many a time, saved me from myself and my faulty belief systems and my addiction and need to please or give myself up in order to be liked or to fit in, because they really see our vulnerability. They see our armor with love and compassion. And as we stand with horses, they present us with the opportunity to truly connect back into our heart's longing and our soul's desires. And in an effort as well, being prey animals, to feel safe, they will always reflect with our truth and tell us how to return to trust, to love with an open heart, and to trust our intuition. And this has been very life-changing for me, and also for many of the thousands of people that I've had the honor to work with over the years. So just remember that, some of us, some people suffer through this for decades and sometimes their entire lives without ever addressing their self-trust issues. And maybe you're one of them. And if you are, I want you to just know that there's nothing wrong with you. You just never learned how to trust that you are enough. You just don't know what you don't know. And our brain and our nervous system is wired to keep us safe and avoid pain. And one of the reasons most people don't think to look beyond symptoms, because they're so preoccupied with the temporary relief of getting away from pain as fast as possible. And it's a very short-term effect. It doesn't have any long-term impact, which is often why we go back to the default pattern of the very thing we're trying to change, because it's familiar, even though It may not be to your best and highest good. People who trust themselves have the patience and the willingness and the capacity to go beyond the symptoms, to solve the root problems and do the work. It's not easy work, which is why a lot of people don't go into the shadows and create better, longer term and more sustainable solutions. To use a gardening metaphor, it's kind of like trimming the weeds instead of pulling them up from their roots. If you're only trimming them on a surface level, of course they're going to grow back stronger and faster. If you spray Roundup or weed killer on a weed, it's incredibly resilient in its capacity, its natural instinct to survive, and it will always find a way round. And the same can apply to the way that when we have certain neural pathways that are shut down, or meridian energy flows that are blocked in our body's always going to find a secondary route to get us back into balance, to get us back into trusting that we have this. So unless the authority figures in your life instilled this in you from childhood, you've likely done a lot of personal growth and development work on yourself to get here, to be listening to this, to be part of my tribe that's always looking for better. And that work includes questioning the structures of external authority and getting crystal clear on where you stand internally. Most people don't realize how little they trust themselves until life throws them a big chronic, healing crisis or breakdown, or some kind of traumatic experience that's going to wake them up to it. Because we're so focused on what we think we're going to lose that we never do the deep work and listen to our intuitive process and our body's innate intelligence. In fact, most people don't even know when they're depressed, because it's become so commonplace to walk about in the Me Too movement, oh, me too, and to bandy, oh, I'm so stressed around, rather than look at how can we change this by getting to the root cause of why you feel the way that you feel in the first place. And let's face it, time is speeding up, and it's a very complex world of uncertainty and so much collective pain out there that we're addicted to distract ourselves because it's tough to do this work. So I want to just remind you that if you are struggling with depression or suicidal ideations, it doesn't mean that your path will be your inevitable outcome. Just because some of these, some people choose to take their lives because they don't see any other way out. And I felt that way at 16. I felt that way in the many times where I tried to take my life and luckily did not succeed and lived to tell the story from an empowered place. But just because other people are choosing that doesn't mean that you will. And if you're struggling and thinking, wow, with all their money and fame, they still couldn't beat the thoughts and the feelings and emotions, remember that depression is very indiscriminate. It doesn't discriminate across cultures or economic privilege. And that your lack of fame or riches doesn't necessarily predispose you more to taking your own life. My father was third-generation alcoholic, and that legacy is still very well and alive in my family. And until I actually got to start doing this work on my own and then supporting my father at the end of his days, I didn't realize up until then that the addiction to alcohol was just a very soft Band-Aid to hide the pain of what was making my father and his mother feel like there was no way out of this very, very dark place of depression and anxiety. So just remember, we don't know the full context of what was at play for the people that we may have loved, or people in the media that are famous that have taken their lives. And Robin Williams is one that is very dear to my heart, because he was such a funny man. And I remember watching Nanu Nanu as a child, and really getting so much profound wisdom and love from his movies like Dead Poets Society, where his pain was incredibly visible. He was incredibly vulnerable in those roles because he wasn't pretending. It was something that he knew to the core of his being. So we don't know, if people that are troubled or have taken their lives or are in a very deep place where they just cannot seem to get a hold on their depression or bipolar or anxiety, we don't know if they were getting help or if they were allowing people or letting people know what was going on for them. We don't know if they were on meds or stopped taking their meds, if they were trying alternative means of EMDR or shock therapy, or we don't know. We just don't know. And if you can and are taking Western prescribed SSRIs or antidepressants, no, it's temporary. If that's what's going to help you while you do the deeper work, there's no shame there. Going to therapy and opening up, there's no shame there. Keep doing that. Do what you know works for you now in the present moment, because this too is going to change and up level. Just as when our body follows our mind, our body chemistry changes. And you're not the same person that you were when you couldn't get out of bed yesterday. And I think demoralizing and defeating are two words that I've seen being bandied around on social media around these celebrities that are taking their own lives. And you may be having the thought, oh gosh, there's two great creators, two incredible people that contributed so much joy and beauty back into the world and in their own gifts and capacities and their crafts, that you may feel a sense of defeat in yourself about coping and dealing with your own self-harming, limiting thoughts. And if this is the case, just take it as a sign. I love the play on words. And for me, depression can sometimes mean that my body is asking me to take a moment of pause and get deep rest, that there's something there that I need to look like, that has taken me out of congruence and alignment with my heart's longings and my core desire. And Linda Kohanoff in The Way of the Horse speaks of this as like soul loss. And I invite you again. I speak so often of depression because this is my PhD of experience. This is where my expertise has led me in my own healing down a path to really, really befriend depression, to befriend grief, because there's a gift in all of this. There's a gift in the pain if we would just hold ourselves and ask for support and allow yourself to let them be your wise counsel in all of this. And sometimes it's not depression. Not all PTSD has soul loss, but there is soul loss in so many ways that we're showing up in our lives. So take a listen to some of those other audios and let me know how I can support you in being able to find the gift wherever you are, in whatever you're going on. Don't ignore any of the signals. And if you've been waiting for a sign, if you've been avoiding dealing with some of these dark feelings or thoughts that, what's the point, or I'm not making any difference. I know these thoughts incredibly well. And until I actually got the physical scientific results back on my last MMRI, depression was something I woke up with every morning. Anxiety is something I still wake up with every morning. But now I don't have to be in that place of total dread that, oh my gosh, this neuroma, this tumor in my head could kill me today. But there's always more underneath those layers. When we pull one area of it out, there's always going to be more underneath the ideation or the belief or the thought or the feeling of why we think we can't move through in a good way and live into our legacy, right? Not die with our song still inside. So please, if you're struggling with the news of the suicides of anybody, whether they're rich and famous or the man that you usually see begging at the street corner that's not there anymore, get support. There are so many ways to be your own medicine, to educate yourself and do the training. And there's so many therapeutic modalities out there. And my work is a wonderful way that fully integrates all 5 layers of commitment to yourself: the mental, the emotional, the spiritual, the physical, and the financial. We have to look at all 5 layers of these because they're the key foundations of where you're out of congruence and not trusting yourself. So if you're sitting there thinking that you can't afford my services, or that you can't afford to get great therapy, that you can't make it in or even find a way to access some of the great online therapy platforms out there, please, start by knowing your National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Your information is completely confidential, and they are very well staffed to support you when you call. For a long time, I used to volunteer my services on the South African suicide hotline, and it was heart-achingly beautiful, and also such an incredible contribution to be able to literally walk people off the cliff. So just know that you're not alone. You're totally supported. And talking is find a friend. Don't isolate. Something that I do a lot still to this day is go back into isolation. And I wrote a post about this the other day, the difference between the cocoon and the cave. So really being honest with yourself is a great place to start. And oftentimes I know that when you're feeling so low and life looks so dark and you can't find a way out, you can't just snap out of depression. And it was one of the things that was not very kind or helpful to me when I was in those very, very dark moments myself. So find somebody who is able to hold that space for you to just listen without the need to fix you or gloss you over with, oh, everything's going to be okay, or mantras and meditations. They don't work when you're in that dark place. So I know that there are going to be weeks where suicide or your thoughts of taking your own life, or someone that that's in a dark place, are triggered when a lot of world attention in the news is put onto mental health and awareness. And even Prince Harry has been speaking about this, and it's one of his big public concerns is to spread more light on mental wellness and health, because he's taken decades to really finally come to a space of peace with his mother's own death and give himself permission to be happy. And we saw that in his wedding, just such a beautiful, delicate fragility to this man that's incredibly sensitive. And growing up where, putting on a stiff upper lip and not showing your feelings and, armoring the heart has been part of his ancestral legacy. So if you struggle with depression, or you're having a history, or perhaps in the present, and ideations around self-harming, I wanted to just let you know that I see you and I get it. And just remember that you're not alone. Just because there are other people choosing the path, choosing to live or choosing to die is a choice, and the power of choice is yours alone. And just because you have those thoughts, there's no shame there. And fear is going to come up and kick you in the pants. but it doesn't mean that you need to follow through. So take care of yourself, my friends, and keep prioritizing your mental health. If you're like me, where for a long time in my own life, I felt like I'd been living in a very dual, bipolar, split way, right? Two different lives. The life that everybody saw from the outside that looked great, that looked like I had it all together, and then the life that only you see. And in that life that everybody sees, it's who I am as a friend or a daughter or a sister or a trauma recovery expert or whatever it is. That's the life everyone sees. And if you were to ask my family and friends to describe me, they'd probably tell you that I'm a really funny, amusing, wise person that has a lot to love and a lot to give. And that's a huge part of me. That is who I am. But if you were to ask me to describe myself, I'd probably say some of those same things. And I wouldn't be lying, but I wouldn't totally be telling you the truth either. Because the truth is that's just the life everybody else sees. And a lot of times I can't trust myself to lean in and give myself permission to encompass all of it, of who I really am in the life that only I see, is someone who will, until the end of the days, continue to struggle intensely with depression and anxiety. And I continue to every day. I wake up and it's a constant willingness to practice and work from this deep level of the root cause of this. And there's layers and layers of it. So, if you're listening to this and you're someone who's never experienced depression, or you don't really know what that means, it might surprise them to hear, because there's this very popular misconception that depression is just being sad when something in your life goes wrong, when you break up with your girlfriend, or when you lose a loved one, or when you don't get the job you wanted. But that's sadness. That's a very natural state. It's a very natural emotion that makes us empathetic and makes us more compassionate. Real depression isn't being sad when something in your life goes wrong. Real depression is being sad when everything in your life is going right. That's real depression. And that's what I suffer from. And to be totally honest, it's sometimes harder. Some days it's harder for me to stand up here and say it like it is. It's hard for me to talk about it. And some days it's not. And no one's talking about depression from the deep down. And we need to be, because right now it's a massive, massive problem. And we don't see it on social media. I watch my 11-year-old and I can see how, being a very sensitive, caring child, there's a sadness in her that's bigger than just being sad that she's, not as skinny or pretty as her friends, or, not fitting into certain constructs of, societal laws, because I'm helping her with that. But there's days where I feel immense fear for how my child is faring, because I see that depression in her that I know so very well. And I sometimes feel like I don't have the tools or the capacity or even the stamina to hold her in the places where I see her pushing me away because she's hurting, because I used to do that too. So, don't believe everything you see on Facebook or Twitter either. Trust yourself, trust that and it's not happy, it's not fun, it's not light, any of this. And I think this is why I've sometimes become very frustrated when people don't see the value in the work that I do and are not prepared to invest in themselves to go there with me, because they're not seeing the severity of what it's costing them in their relationships, in their health, to not get it handled. Every 30 seconds, somewhere, someone in the world takes their own life. because of depression. And, you know, it might be 2 blocks away. It might be 2 countries away. It might be continents away. But it's happening, and it's happening every single second of every single day. And we have a tendency as society to look at that and go, so what? So what? We look at that and we go, that's your problem. That's their problem. And we sort of do this with animals as well, that we see that are in incredible pain, where people are doing terrible things, and we gloss over it and we ignore it, and we go, so what, as a sense of armoring up or defense, because we feel like that could be contagious. And as I said, this is a problem where I have revisited many, many times when I've sat on the edge of my bed, a million times before, when I was suicidal. And if you look at my life on the surface, you wouldn't see a child who was suicidal. You'd see a child who was an A-game student and the youngest person to ever represent your country at 12. I was a champion swimmer and gorgeous and pretty, and you'd see that, you know, the prefect of and the captain of the swimming team, and the English student that got high accolades in the Eisteddfod. You wouldn't see somebody, you wouldn't say I was depressed. You wouldn't say I wasn't suicidal, and you'd be wrong. You'd be wrong. So often, you know, everything you see is not necessarily what's going on. So if you've been there, like I have, with a knife to your wrists or a bottle of pills in your hand, and you're thinking about taking your own life now, or you've been there before, it's okay. You know, I came close to doing this many times, and I was pulled back from the brink of death by friends that cared, by my own strong spirit to live. And I'm one of the lucky ones, I suppose. You know, one of the people who didn't who did step on the ledge and look down, but I didn't jump. I survived. And not only did I survive, but the experience of this has allowed me to speak to that for others and find a way through that pain. And, you know, it's really, really simple. I suffer from depression. And for a long time, I think I was living two totally different lives, where one person was always afraid of the other. I was afraid that people would see me for who I really was, that I wasn't perfect, that I was afraid. I didn't, you know, I just wanted people to like me. But there's always struggle, and there always will be. Beneath the light, there's always dark. And beneath my big personality that's funny and kind and loving, just like Robin Williams, it's a great place to hide pain under humor. So, big breath. And here's the thing, you know, some people might fear girls not liking them back, and some people might fear sharks, and some people might fear death, or some people might fear that they're going to die because they don't have the money to get out of the debt or pay their mortgage or keep their family afloat. But for me, for a part of my life, I just feared myself. I was terrified of my truth. I was really, really frightened of my honesty, because people used to say I lacked tact, because my truth was the truth, and I saw things as a psychic, intuitive, sensitive person that other people couldn't see in themselves, just like horses. I was that prey animal that was so terrified of my own ability to speak to the truth. And that fear made me feel like I was forced into a corner, and there was no way out of it. And so I thought about that way every single day of taking my life, my late teens. And I thought about it every single day since. And if I'm being totally honest, standing here, I've thought about it because that's part of the malady. That's part of the the separation sickness, that's the struggle, that's depression. And depression isn't chickenpox. You don't beat it once and it's gone forever. It's something you live with. It's something you live in. It's the roommate you can't kick out. It's the voice you cannot ignore. So my strength in overcoming and seeing the gift in depression is to write. It's to speak to that. It's to feel it. It's to sit with it. It's to follow my body's natural impulse, because it's a voice you can't ignore. So why not use the voice and put it to the greater good of not just your life, but others too. And so I do. I show up because it's the feelings that you can't escape. And the scariest part is that after a while, you become numb to it. It becomes normal for you. And what you really fear the most isn't the suffering inside of you. It's the stigma inside of others. It's the shame. It's the embarrassment. It's the disapproving look on a friend's face. It's the whispers in the hallway that you're weak. And it's the comments that you're crazy. You know, I'm willing to be the crazy cat lady now, and to give depression a voice, to give that trauma a voice. I'm not here to make friends that doesn't drive me anymore, because that's what keeps you from getting help. That's what makes you hold it in and hide it. It's the stigma. So you hold it in and you hide it, and you hold it in and you hide it. And even though it's keeping you in bed every day and it's making your life feel empty, no matter how much you try and fill it, you hide it, because the stigma in our society around depression is very, very real. It's very real. And if you think that isn't it, ask yourself, would you rather make your next Facebook status say you're having a tough time getting out of bed because you hurt your back? Or you're having a tough time getting out of bed every morning because you're in a deep, dark hole of depression? Because that's the stigma. Unfortunately, we live in a world where if you break your arm, everybody runs over to sign your cast. But if you tell people you're depressed, everybody runs the other way. That's the stigma. And we're so accepting of any body part breaking down other than our brains. And that's ignorance. That's the pure ignorance that comes for verbal and mental abuse as well. Whether you're abusing yourself or someone else is abusing you. It's the ignorance that has created a world that doesn't fully comprehend the full spectrum of depression. It doesn't understand mental health. And that's ironic to me, because depression is one of the best documented problems we have in the world. Yet it's one of the least discussed. We just push it aside, take a pill, put it in a corner, pretend it's not there, and hope it'll fix itself. And of course, if you're still with me listening to this, you know it won't. It hasn't in the past, and it's not going to, because that's wishful thinking. And wishful thinking isn't a game plan. It's a procrastination. It's a resistance. And you cannot procrastinate on something that's important. The first step is in acknowledging first that this is how you feel and giving voice to the feeling. And recognizing that there's something to be concerned about here. There's a problem. And we haven't done that. So we can't really expect to find an answer when we're still afraid of the question, or to even consider getting curious and going into a place of compassionate listening to that voice of fear. And I don't know what the solution is for you, because your individual prescription is yours and yours alone. But I do know how to support you in going there. And here's another truth. You know, for a long time, I was afraid to speak to my own experiences, because I thought that would, make people distrustful of my expertise in this field. That they would look at me and go, well, how can I trust her to help me when she can't get her own shit together? And I won't go there anymore, because I know that there is value in every step by step. Inch by inch is a cinch, yard by yard is hard. We don't have to know everything. We just have to know what we know. And I think it has to start here. It has to start with me. It has to start with you. And it has to start with people who are suffering the ones who are hidden in the shadows, that are cutting, that are drinking themselves into oblivion, that are considering slow ways to kill themselves because they don't have the courage. It takes incredible courage to take your own life. There's no weakness in that. And how many of us are slowly dying inside, protecting a life that we're not living? It has to start with people who are suffering, the ones that are us, the ones that we know, the ones that we love in our lives. We need to speak up and shatter the silence, and we need to be the ones who are brave for what we believe in, braving the wilderness. Because if there's one thing that I've come to realize over the years, if there's one thing that I see as the biggest problem, it's distrust. It's not in building a world where we eliminate the ignorance of others, which is distrust. It's in building a world where we trust that we can teach ourselves to remember what it means to love ourselves exactly as we are, where we're okay with who we are. Because when we get honest, when we trust that, when we see that we all struggle and we all suffer, it's part of our humanity, our frailty. It's part of the prey aspect of us. And whether it's with this or whether it's with someone else or something else, we all know what it's like to feel hurt and betrayed and abandoned and rejected. And we do a really good job of doing that to ourselves in our coping mechanisms and our need to be in this addiction cycle, this pattern of abuse. We all know what it is to have pain in our heart, and we all know how important it is to heal. Wholeness means to come home, to be whole in yourself. And right now, depression is society's deep cut that we're content to continue to band-aid over and pretend it's not there and feed the big pharma. And it's there. And you know what? It's okay. It's okay to feel depression. It's okay to feel anxious. And if you're going through it, know that you're okay. You're not alone. And you're not sick. You're not weak, and it's an issue, not an identity. You are the one that is hurting. You are the one that feels the feelings. You are the one that thinks the thoughts. But you are not that thing. And when you get past the fear and ridicule and the judgment and the stigmas of others and your own inner saboteur voice, then you can see depression for what it really is. That's the gift, and that's the part of life. A part of life, and as much as I hate it, as much as I hate some of the places and some of the parts of my life depression has dragged me down to, in a lot of ways, I'm grateful for it. I can appreciate that I'm the one that consciously or unconsciously chose it. We choose our own woundings to grow us. And yes, it's put me in the valleys of death, but only to show me that there's a peak in the ascent, in the illumination, in the elevation. It's one step at a time. And I'll probably be dragged there many more times into the dark when I'm out of congruence, when I lose my way. Just to remind me that I am the light and that there is light, that we can trust in a forgiving, generous universe, that we can trust in others because we trust in ourselves. I really believe that when we embrace our light, then we can embrace the shadows, because it's the inside of you. The world, I believe, is in one where we're measured by our ability to overcome adversities, not avoid them. And the world, again, my belief is one where I can look someone in the eye, heart to heart, and say, I feel your pain. I see you're going through hell. Or I can be brave enough to say, I'm in a really bad place right now. And they can go, me too. Not to minimize it, not to negate that you're in pain, but from a place of strength that is okay. That it's okay because depression is okay. Anxiety is okay. We're people and we struggle and we suffer and we bleed and we cry and we hurt. And if you think that true strength means never showing any weakness, then I'm here to tell you that you're wrong. You're wrong because it's the unside. It's the opposite of that. There's no opposing force. It's part of who we are in our true nature. We're not perfect, and that's okay. So we need to stop the ignorance, stop the intolerance, stop the numbing down, stop the desensitization, stop the stigma, and stop the silence. Take away the taboos. Take a look at your truth and the truth. Trust that. Use your voice to empower others to know that everything is there to grow us, including the dark, including the depression and the anxiety. Because the only way that we're going to rise up above all of this that's killing the world, creating more separation than ever, is to rise up, to stand strong together, to brave that wilderness together as women who are fully rooted in the earth, to speak to that medicine of the feminine that knows that the strength is in the roots on how to become the person that you, as that little seed, knew you came here to be and fulfill that, living legacy. We stand strong together, and I believe that is the place where trust lies. And I know we can do this. So thank you. Make your dreams come true. Go out there and be the best that you can be. Cause I'll be right here. Just have no fear. You know that it's true. Open the door. I'll let you in. One thing's for sure.